later. And with it, so we've got I think a pretty hot topic tonight based on feedback from some of you probably. And let me just kind of share my screen real fast, and then I'm going to ask you a question, whether it's in the chat or out loud would be great too, because I want to know kind of where to steer this conversation. And I'll share some content that I prepared and hopefully get a little bit of the village effect tonight, share some thoughts and some wisdom from each of our families so that we can steal from each other. But the real topic right now is this idea of searching for motivation when it comes to with our kids. And it was good to catch up with Casey right beforehand, because I live not too far, a couple miles from the school, but I'm not that familiar with the student experience, although I live in the world of design and design thinking. And I've spent quite a bit of time at places like High Tech High. So I'm kind of familiar with it. And I think the general thought that I would have is, if there's any group of students that wouldn't struggle with motivation, it would be students at Design 39, because the entire outfit, your entire school is built on intrinsic motivation and exploring students' interests and passions. And you've hired a bunch of teachers that are totally vibing with that, and I'm sure are fun and engaging. Nevertheless, this has been a rocky road for most students. So I just want to maybe check in here and to kind of, really the question is, what are you seeing with your kids as it relates to motivation? Not what have you done or how have you solved it, but in what ways do you see lack of motivation or resistance coming out inside your homes as it relates, whether it's school specifically, or it might be around some interests or hobbies or sports that they've had that they're no longer interested in. So just want to hear from you, and maybe this is the chat function, or maybe this is just something that you can share out loud. And I think that'll really help us kind of steer where this goes, because I don't want to share anything that's not helpful for you. So where are you seeing demotivation? They used to have those motivation posters back in the day, back in the 90s. You could find them at Hot Topic or something. Then there's a series of them, the demotivator posters. I don't know if you ever saw those. They're pretty funny. A lot of them having to do with the workplace. But in what ways are you seeing struggles with motivation with your kids or you? Yeah.
I think it's me. I'm Cheryl. I have a kindergartner and a first grader, and the kindergartner is starting to get distracted with the virtual learning. So she's fine at school, and she used to be okay with getting all the app things done, but now she somehow learned how to use Siri and use the internet, and she's taking screenshots of LOLs and things like that. So I'll catch her hiding with her iPad screen away from me, and I know what she's doing, because she'll then share it into a shared photo stream. But I don't know how to stop her from doing that, because she just has access, and I'll take Siri off, but she knows how to turn it back on. So that's one of the areas that I'm struggling with.
Yeah. Thanks, Cheryl. I can relate to that. We have got a little second grader, and sometimes it feels like my wife's playing part bouncer, part, I don't know, just wrestling coach, just to get her to pay attention for a little bit. And part of, and maybe a little spoiler alert, part of that is like, no kidding, no wonder. I don't want to sit. Do any of you sit in front of the screen all day and sit in front of meetings? Yeah. So, yeah. Anyone else? Thanks, Cheryl. Anyone else want to share where you're seeing lack of motivation with your kids?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I have a middle schooler, sixth grade for the first time, and so he's was before BC, before COVID. He was involved in a lot of sports and things, and was pretty active, and we kept pretty busy, and it seemed all pretty good. And then coronavirus comes along, and all that shuts down, right? And school becomes harder, and he's not really all that he's not one of the great independent agents of his own learning. He needs to have, you know, people kind of keeping track on him, checking him on him, make sure he's doing his things. But the resentment of the parents doing it, right, is a you know, familiarity breeds contempt, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it led into this introverted, kind of demotivated person for a year, right? And so now that school's kind of starting to open up a little bit, and sports are starting to come on, at least in pods or semi-seasons. It remains to be seen. I mean, this is all just happening this week, so it remains to be seen. But you know, the whole thing of inertia, right? It's an object at rest will remain at rest until you change it. And so, you know, it's easier to become demotivated, it seems, than it is to become motivated again. And so we're just having that phase start up again. And if you have any thoughts or ideas on how to smoothly run this up, or things that we can, traps we can avoid running into, that's just, it's not guaranteed that he's going to become motivated.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's such a long time of being demotivated.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thanks, Tony.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else want to share? Where are you seeing that? Where are you seeing demotivation, lack of motivation in your house, your home?
I think for me, I have three, but my two younger ones, I have a first and a third. So I have no problem with my oldest one, which is in 5th grade. But the younger two, they have I have them all in different areas, but when it's their scheduling. So when one's done with Zooming, they'll come out of the room and go downstairs, and it kind of distracts the other one from Zooming. So they kind of distract each other. So after that, it's hard for the other one to go back to Zooming. So it's more the scheduling, I guess, with one Zooming and the other one not. And then once the other one's off, then the other one goes back. So they kind of follow each other. So it's hard to get back. So I have to, separate them. So it's more the scheduling. I wish they would be all on the same scheduling and off the Zooming part.
Yep. Yeah, we have our kids' best friends are across the street, and they're at a different school, like a charter school. And so it's the same thing. Our kids can see them playing outside in the middle of the day. So what do our kids want to do? Of course. Yeah. Well, let's dig into some content. That's really helpful for me to know some of you, where you're coming from. And I think a part of this for any of us is, we can all relate to this. We can all relate to our kids. And I think as a parent, I'll just speak honestly, I am under quite a bit of pressure and stress. I am not enjoying at this rate the kind of rhythm of life that we've kept. And I can understand where they're at, but I also it's kind of like, we really need you to do your own thing. Isn't that kind of how we feel sometimes as parents? We need you to manage your own life. We need you to do your own work. We've got so much going on in our own worlds. That's one of the biggest things that we miss, not having our kids in school for 6 to 7 hours a day, or sometimes longer if you're doing an ESS after school. Someone else is taking care of them. They're getting their stuff done. They're on going to the different stops on the train in the right time. So generally, just to name it, I think all can relate to the idea of feeling demotivated. So what do we do? Just to pause and think, what do you do that's effective, that's helpful when you're feeling stuck? You're feeling the resistance. You're feeling like, I can't move forward. And I know for me, throughout the day, I get there, and I've learned to pay attention to the time I need to take a walk, the time I need to call a friend, the time I need to watch a show for a few minutes. I did that today while I was having a sandwich. I'm like, I've got 5 things I could be or should be doing. I'm going to watch my little show that I've been binge watching for the past couple of weeks. I'm just going to watch it turn into 11 minutes. I actually kept it on for another 10 while I was doing an email, which is a new idea. But what, we have the tools, the resources, most of us, to think through how can we pull ourselves out of this. Positives, and if you were here the last time we shared a couple weeks ago, a lot of the content that I shared, if you haven't watched it, it's recorded around stress. When we get overwhelmed, when we feel like we don't have any more resources, there's actually physical things that we can do to help ourselves work through it. Going outside, getting exercise, breathing, having a positive social interaction with a friend, laughing. There's a bunch of things that we can do to work through these moments where we get stuck. But I think just to put it in a different term, I don't think any of our kids would say this about school and their experience of their life these days, but there's a lot of veggies and not a lot of dessert for their lives and for ours. In other words, there's a lot of stuff that we're just supposed to do because it's good for us. We're supposed to sit here. We're supposed to get our work done. We're supposed to be quiet. We're supposed to have a clean desk. So just from a kid perspective, from your kids' perspective, there's a lot of stuff that I'm supposed to do. And there's not a lot of the stuff that makes school come alive. The social interactions, the sports, the activities, so much of that has been not happening or not happening in the same way, where it's kind of fun killers, joy killers. Being on a soccer team, but never playing a game, which is what some of your kids have probably been doing. Going to baseball practice for weeks, but never having a game, never having competition because you don't want to travel to Yuma. So there's an experience here that it just makes sense. And a part of understanding, and there's some deeper science. And if you're interested, I can share some scientific journal articles. And there's a really good popular book called Drive by Daniel Pink. It's got a great TED Talk as well, all about the science of motivation. And so I'm going to share some content from there. And one particular thing, now I'm not a therapist. I really kind of sit in the space of coaching, curriculum design, but I'm a voracious reader and a participant in therapy myself. So I'll speak from my own perspective. Quite often, what we perceive as lack of motivation in our kids is often what you could call resistance, or in other words, you might call passive aggression. When we feel powerless, we try to feel powerful by withholding something. I was telling Casey right beforehand, I used to work for a large nonprofit, national nonprofit, and I had to go to many all-day meetings, staff trainings, staff conferences. The older I got, the longer I spent in that organization, the more resistant I became to going to them. I found myself showing up late. Oh, there's traffic. I found myself sitting in the back of the room. I found myself being the guy that was making jokes to people to distract them. I found when they wanted us to dig into work around the table, I'd just be like, I'm gonna go get coffee. I felt resistance. Why? Because I felt like I had to show up. I didn't have any say in the agenda. I didn't want to be there. It felt like a waste of time. They never told me why we had to be there. So passive aggression. So when we often see, and I heard this a little bit with what Tony was sharing, sometimes when we see lack of motivation in our kids, it actually is motivation. They're just motivated towards something else. Their agenda is to get some control back. Their agenda is to feel like they're in charge of something. And if you think about the life of a kid, a lot of what they are doing throughout the day is governed by somebody else. Now, how fun is that for you? And developmentally, for those of you like Cheryl, you have kindergartner, first grader, that world is okay. They might not even be aware of it. We can create the boundaries and guardrails and kind of keep them, hey, stay here, but have fun here. The older someone gets, you're talking about 6th, 7th, and 8th grade and adolescence, and developmentally, they actually want to carve their own path. They want to have their own freedom. So the more that they want to have freedom and the less freedom that they've ever had in their lives, and we've all ever had, man, that's a recipe for being angry, for being frustrated, for being irritated, for being annoyed. And that, how do you express that? How does a compliant kid who loves his parents, who wants to be a good kid and do what he's supposed to, how else can he express that I'm feeling frustrated? It can often come out by dragging feet. You might see that explicitly in a toddler who doesn't want to go somewhere. You just picture the toddler and you're trying to get them inside Target or get them out of the toy aisle. That's resistance. That's angry. That's aggression. but the older they get, the more subtle it becomes. So I often talk to parents and say, especially the parents that call us and call me and say, hey, what do I do? I'm worried. My kid doesn't care about school. My kid doesn't care about sports. This is the first conversation we have. So in what way is your kid trying to express something that they're frustrated and they don't feel like they have much power and control? And so we're going to dig into what do we do about that? How do we address that? That's one part. So one kind of high level, how do we identify and understand lack of motivation? The next part, I just put it in the idea of scaffolding. The idea of scaffolding holds things up. So I think of my second grader who is always running around, is always running outside. As soon as we turn our back, she's booking it for the front yard, the backyard, under a table. She's kind of like you, Cheryl. I think if she had an iPad, she'd be all about it. She's running. And what we didn't notice when she was in school full time is some learning issues, some reading issues. And we didn't notice that because she was at school all day. We didn't notice that because she loves going to school. She loves being with her friends. She loves organizing things. She loves the social aspect. That is all but gone for her. What's left is the stuff that she didn't like. We're thankful because we've been able to identify some issues and get her some intervention, some support, and she's doing well. But the usual scaffolding, the social dynamics of school, back to the idea of the dessert, especially as kids get older, when what they're pursuing is acceptance by peers. I'm talking 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. When that's like the primary, biggest, top of mind need, thirst, I need to find acceptance in peers. I'm looking for who I am. All of a sudden, my friends are everything, and they don't have the experience to explore that. Man, so why am I going to school? What's this for? I was having a great conversation today with a principal of a big public high school locally, and we were having that conversation. We have to now answer the question, what is school for? What is school for? Is it for academics? Is it for socialization? Is it for mental health? There's a lot of questions that are being disruptive. That's a total side topic. So you pull out all this stuff. You pull out Wednesday night is soccer practice. Thursday night is gymnastics. Friday night, there's a church youth group thing. You pull out that stuff, and what have you got? We've got the veggies. We've got a lot of veggies all the time. So again, makes sense. Lack of motivation makes sense. Now, and you've heard these words before, extrinsic motivation versus intrinsic. Extrinsic is, especially with the scaffolding, it typically gets our kids moving. It gets some action. It gets us getting to the next station relatively on time. And it looks like, hey, you should be doing this, or maybe we try a reward. This is probably what many of us have spent the last year doing, looking for ways, carrots and sticks, to get our kids engaged, motivated, sitting down, doing your work, caring about it, doing it well, turning it in on time, learning how to use all the different platforms. And this is what many of our workplaces do too. If you hit your numbers this quarter, you get to go to Cancun next year. And the science and the research has shown that extrinsic motivation doesn't last long. It does get you moving, but it doesn't last long. It'll get you around the track once. You will not go twice or 3 times or 4 times. You start wondering, what is this for? Who cares? And a lot of school days often built around extrinsic motivations, a bell ringing, a bunch of people running, no one else is talking, so you don't talk. There's a lot of just socialization, that the boundaries, the guardrails. And so kids keep going down the track. Imagine a bunch of sheep trying to get them in a pen. What we're looking for, of course, is intrinsic motivation. I think when we think about intrinsic motivation, there's a great clip in, I think it's a Vince Vaughn, Jennifer Aniston movie called The Breakup. And they're having this argument about who's doing the dishes and how come he didn't do the dishes that night. And then she says, I wish you would just want to do the dishes. And then Vince Vaughn, the character, is like, want to do the dishes? Why would I want to do the dishes? And that's the whole argument. I wish you would want to do it. I'm going to say that this is a goal, a dream, a desire of ours. And it's an outcome that we're looking for towards the end of our kids' time with us, like whenever that is. 18, 19, 20, 28. This is a goal for us towards the end of it all. And if you're not seeing intrinsic motivation in a 9-year-old for school, number one, you're in good company. Most kids don't. Number two, be not afraid. This is the kind of stuff that takes time to percolate. But intrinsic motivation, there's a few different ways to pull at this, to create a conditions for this for your kid. And this comes from great research by Daniel Pink. Number one is autonomy. So it's the ability to choose things, the ability to make choice. It's why D39 has been such an attractive school and education model, because you spend so much time through the lens of project-based learning and giving kids the opportunity to tackle and learn something through their own tools and their own lens. It's autonomy. We want to give you the autonomy to pursue learning this and demonstrating that you've learned this content but in the way that you want. And we're going to get into what we can do in just a second as it relates to this. The second one is mastery. I feel like I can become good at this. One of the quickest ways to lose motivation in a kid is when they feel overwhelmed by something. They don't feel like they understand something. Most of us didn't learn that as a character trait until late into our adult years. In other words, if I'm not good at something, why would I want to do it? If I feel silly, if I feel stupid, if I feel slow, if I feel like everyone else is getting it and I don't, why would I do that? That's actually self-preservation to not be motivated to learn. So I dig my heels in. Parents then, you can see the conflict. I'm sure you can relate, as I have for all three of my kids. When there's some demonstrated, hey, what's with your grade here? What's going on here? Why didn't you turn this in? What's not? That's, I go to, well, we got to buckle down. We got to make sure you're doing this. And if I can slow down and take a deep breath and take a step back and try to figure out what's going on with this kid and how do we miss this? And we actually can reapproach that conversation and say, oh, you don't understand it. Oh, that's a different problem to solve. So what can we do? Is it office hours? Is it a quick email to the teacher? What can we do? Is it, I need to brush up on my Khan Academy, how to actually understand how to do the math now? And then the third one is purpose. It's why are we doing this? Parents, I don't have time often to tell my kids, why are we doing this? Why are we eating vegetables? I mean, just eat your stupid vegetables. Like, why are we learning this? Because we don't often take the time to share why it's important. I was talking to a group of middle school kids the other day who were just joking, like, this is so stupid. Why do we have to learn this math? We never have to learn it. And I kind of want to jump in and say, I don't know. I've never learned that. I've never used that math either. But instead I said, one of the things that you're challenged to do at this age is to learn how to do a lot of stuff well. And if you don't do a lot of stuff well, you probably won't get into like a college that you want to go to. And if you don't learn how to do a lot of stuff well, you might not be as employable. And so if you can figure out how to put your feelings about this math equation aside and your feelings about that teacher aside and realize this is about your life, maybe, just maybe, you'll get motivated. Did that work? No, it didn't work. They went right back to making fun of that teacher. But intrinsic motivation is, hey, this is something I get to do. This is something I want to do. That's what intrinsic motivation looks like. And so what we're going to talk about is how do we have a conversation with our kids where we try to parse out what do you want to do as it relates to whether it's school or an activity or stopping doing something. I'm sure we didn't mention this, but I'm sure some of you have kids who are really prone to gaming or being on screens. And we're trying to kind of get them off that. They're motivated for that, but they're not motivated to be outside. They're not motivated to socialize. So what do you want versus what are you willing to do? So baby steps. And this is going to get into some of the negotiation. And one thing I want you to hopefully realize that I'm realizing is every kid, every one of us is motivated by something. And a good part of the trick of all this, the higher level Jedi stuff, is learning to figure out what is our kid motivated to do? What are they motivated by? Motivated for control, motivated for freedom, motivated to feel like they are smart and competent, motivated to fit in, motivated to have fun, motivated to get out of this situation. They're motivated by something. So let's try to figure out what it is. And then the last thing, and this is before we kind of go into like very specific content, boom, 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 boom. We talked about this at the beginning, or I thought this at the beginning. Quite frankly, we can't motivate someone to do anything for very long. That's the joke between Jennifer Aniston and Vince Vaughn. She couldn't make him want to do the dishes. We can't make our kids want to do school, want to play sports, want to get off the games. We really can't. We can do it for a short period of time, but we cannot change their hearts. That's not something that we can do. And so part of, I think, why we get together like this, and it's not just a article to read, is so that we can hang out with some other parents and just name that that's a reality of parenting. And we can do the best we can do, and still they might not want to do it. They might not want to learn. They might not want to go make friends. They might not want to get off their screen. So I just want to kind of name that and say that's a reality. That's hard. So let's dig in really quickly. So what are some ways in which we can approach our kids, come alongside our kids? That's not from Burnout. Sorry, and delete that. And support them. So first thing, we can empathize with our kids. My wife has this, I would call it an exercise at this point because she does it so often. Every night at dinner, we do this exercise called 3 Good Things. What are the 3 good things that happened today? We've been doing it for the last year. But she also has added one recently where she gives the kids the time at dinner to say, and what sucked today? And at first the kids are like, what do you know, we're not allowed to say that word. You're not supposed to say that word. She's like, no, just for a minute. What was sucky about today? And as you know, we're kind of pendulating from, I had a good sandwich and it was fun to go walk in the rain, and we got to dance in this class for a minute, and that was cool. But when they'll also say, it was so stupid to sit and listen to PE teacher talk for an hour and 20 minutes of the hour and 30-minute class, just talk at us. That sucked. And then, you know what we do? We say, oh gosh, really? Oh, that does suck. Or a daughter who says, it sucks that I can't see my friends from elementary school now that she's in middle school. She hasn't seen them. Hasn't seen them in a year. And we're like, that sucks. And there's something about empathizing. There's something about naming that actually can be transformative to our kids. Help them realize that what you're feeling is normal. That passive aggression that you're feeling makes sense. And this is no fun. This is no good. This is not easy. This is unprecedented. This has never happened before. This is terrible all around. I think I get so used to just plowing ahead. I often forget, like my wife reminds us, let's just call it as it is. This is not cool. This is not good. This is not sustainable. This is not the way it's supposed to be. That's first thing. Second, most kids don't yet have the ability to problem solve. So when the kid feels stuck in math, they don't have the capacity to think, maybe I should go to office hours. Problem solving skills are executive functioning skills, really in the prefrontal cortex of our brains that don't really fully develop until mid to late 20s. So we as adults can think through, well, gosh, if you're feeling lonely, call a friend. We can think that way. Our kids actually can't. So we can come alongside them and help them problem solve. Once, and it doesn't help until we've empathized and named. So there's steps to this. We can't just call your friend. And then you try to say that to a middle school kid who's feeling lonely. Just call your friend, just call them up. And then you're going to get the eye rolls. You don't get it. Just not going to go well. But we can help them once we've spent some time, a few minutes. Oh, that's so sad. That's hard. You're right. We can help them problem solve. Third one, we can give them control. We can give them control. So, and I'm sure most of you have already done this around their workspace at home, around their room. I remember the way my middle school daughter's eyes lit up when she was mentioning that her friends all had these LED lights in their rooms, these awfully bright, different colored lights. That was the last thing I'd ever want in my house. And I just looked at her and said, would you like that? And she was like, what? I was like, would you like me to get? And that little thing has been a big deal because now she's on her Zoom camera and she changes the colors, and we've kicked her little sister out of the room all day. We've given her little sister a different space. I'm trying to whisper because I think little sister's like 10 feet away from me. She doesn't know what we've done. But in other words, oh, and then with my son, we gave him a little budget. We gave him $40 to buy some art for his room. And he was like, okay. I was surprised. I thought I'd be like, I don't care. He was kind of like, okay, that'd be cool. And I think they went to Home Goods or something, he and my wife. So authorize control. What are you willing to do? What do you want to do? What do you want to do about this? So you've got an hour of kind of free time. What do you want to do? What would be most helpful? Do you want to go out and run first? Do you want to watch a show for 5 minutes? Do you want to give control, give choice? Back to that passive aggression. I don't feel like I'm in charge of anything. I feel like I'm a prisoner. I feel like I'm a soldier. I don't feel like a human. I don't feel like so what can you give them? What can they do? What can they look forward to? What do you want to do Friday night? What movie do you want to pick? Do you want to have a friend over, a friend that we know the parents, safe, etc.? Do you want to have a friend? Do you want to have a play date? Something to look forward to, something that they get to choose. It's a big deal. Laughter, not yelling. This is what I'm learning to do. Yelling hasn't worked yet in my house. I don't know about you. Intensity, when I see my kids demotivated, has not worked yet. It works for me because it's the voice in my head, because I'm pretty driven, extremely driven. So, oh, you're lazy? You better get back in a game. They're going to lap you. You're never going to make it. That actually kind of works for me, but I'm an adult. And I can temper that voice with, it's okay. I'm loved. It's going to be all right. It doesn't work yet unless you're a coach to yell. That's my joke, why I coach youth sports. It gives me permission to yell at other people's kids. But it doesn't work for very long. Laughter works better. Laughter works better. Laughter when we dance with our kids. Laughter when we make fun of the teacher for talking for an hour and 20 minutes straight. Like, that's crazy. Are you kidding me? That's what? Rather than, you should be paying attention. You're not paying attention for that. It's just different. So it's the opposite of being intense. It's empathy. That being said, giving our kids some consequences and rewards is really helpful. You need to wake up. You need to get dressed. You need to be in front of your computer. You need to be ready at the car. You need to have your mask. You need to have your laptop. And if you don't, I'm still going to take you. I'm going to drop you off, that kind of thing. Or rewards. This is especially for younger kids. Our little one now has a treat at the end of the day, every day. That was a suggestion by her teacher. So she gets a treat every day. It's a cake pop. It's a frozen yogurt. It's a candy. It's literally, that's going to get you through the day. And it's working. Let's do it again. It's carrots and sticks. So the older our kids get, the more nuanced that needs to be. That's for me and our kids, that's screen time. That's the opportunity to spend time with friends at their house or our house. That's the more significant things. And we're just kind of saying, hey, we just can't, you can't do that if that's how you're going to treat school. So it's your job. And if you don't do your job, you don't get it. My son has to do 90 minutes of yard work to keep his phone every week. It's a contract. He signed it. And you know what happened when he only did 4 minutes? I turned off his phone for a week. You know what happened the next week? He did your work for 90 minutes. It's not that complicated sometimes. Negotiate. So what are you willing to do? What will you do? Come on. What are you willing to give me today? I got to get to my work meeting. And then finally, is there a better structure? Is there a better way to think about this for you and your kid? I'm going to be quiet in just a second and then maybe see if any of this is helpful or not helpful, or if there's any sort of tidbit or tip that you've learned or something that you found with your family. I think I just want to leave the last couple minutes for you to share with each other. And I want to learn from you too and figure out what works. And so finally, back to kind of the big picture. We're in this unprecedented time that, as we talked about in the beginning, has a light at the end of the tunnel. And we, especially those of us involved with education on the back end, we understand that the pressure for kids being behind, and I don't have to sit with that pressure because I'm not in charge of an instruction for a school site like Eric is. But nevertheless, we all know that the rules are out the window this year. The idea of getting behind doesn't really matter in a way that's mattered before. It doesn't really exist this time around. And so what does it look like? Great advice from a principal for me and my daughter the other day. He said, your anxiety for her to learn math and stay on the computer screen is a huge concern. You don't want her to get behind. But he said, but you also really don't want her to start to resent school or to hate school or fear it. So what does it look like for you to release some of the pressure and recognize this is going to end soon? They're going to return to a life that's way more normal than now. Back to all the scaffolding, back to the socialization, back to the dessert, back to having fun, back to playing, back to being kids, back to adolescents getting what they need from their peers. So what does it look like for us to be patient with that? And they're going to catch up. So I'm done. I want to hear from you in the chat or out loud. What's been working? What's something that worked for a minute or two, or it's been working this whole time? And if you've got a gold nugget, please share it with the other families here, because we're all trying to figure this out on our own. Yeah, sure.
I thought that the rewards like treats and things like that were an extrinsic reward. So I was trying to not do that. Or,
yeah,
they'll say, we want to go to Target, or we want a piece of candy, or we want to watch something on a show. And I'll say no, because you should just want to do it. You don't do it because you're getting something. You want to do it because you're going to learn something. Your brain's going to grow. So it sounds like that's okay to do.
So here's my perspective. There's an age spectrum. So yeah, with a high school kid and you're like trying to dangle a cake pop to do algebra today, it doesn't quite make sense. But I think for younger, it does. Okay. Because they're not thinking about from their executive brain. I wonder about education and my career, my future. That's not in part of the radar. And there's an element too, we do need to get that train to the next station. We do need to get them to show up. We do need to get them to stay. I do need to work. My wife needs to get other stuff done. So we needed them to sit there. So if it's a cake pop, if it's Target, if it's a toy at the end of the week for $5, I think it's game on.
Great. Thank you.
Any other thoughts, other things that have worked, or anything that resonated with you, or something you want to try, or something you completely disagree with? let's dig in. We'll have this for another minute and a half before we wrap up.
I think there's a question of what the reward is for, as I think about my own kids. And the reward is because I finished the task. We all get the good feeling of finishing a task. And the reward, ideally, what we would we want the student to control their own ability to be the assistant, because it's nice to have an assistant. I've had assistants most of my professional career. My kid would have an assistant sometimes. But am I rewarding because, well, we got the work done, or did you make the right steps to get the work done? Tell me what you did with your planner. Tell me what you did with your assignment. Tell me what you did to take control, so that I'm rewarding the behavior that will let me release of being the dependent helper, which I think that's okay to do. It's like having the assistant. It's nice to have assistants. But what am I giving the reward for? And does it lead to a better outcome, or development of a habit?
That is great, Eric. Thank you. Really good. Anyone else?
I can circle back around. I talked about demotivation earlier on, and I think what you just said at the very beginning of all this, when we feel powerless, right? We want to try, we withhold, right? And we try to gain power some other way. And I think that the demotivation is really, it's resonating with this powerless feeling, because that's what's happened is I think everybody's kind of lost their power for about a year, grown-ups too, right? So, and I think that that's really something, I know even adults are getting annoyed or frustrated or things. So, so this has really helped me put a different light, shine a different light on the demotivation issue. So I really appreciate that thought that you put out there.
Good. Good. Thank you. I'm glad. Well, any last comment?
Yeah, I just was going to agree and say my go-to is always the consequence or the reward. So it's nice to have some other ideas and things to try.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can't wait for our kids to, I'm sure like you, just have freedom and more opportunities to play and be together. And that's just kind of, I mean, to any degree, I didn't appreciate that before. I hope that we all, a year from now, just think, isn't this still amazing that we get to do this? We get to be together. Our kids get to play and learn. And it's, so I'm hoping we come out of that. I hope I come out of it grateful and good perspective, but I'm sure it won't last long. We'll just get busy back into the next thing, the next phase of life. Well, thank you for joining us, and we'll keep this recording and put up to YouTube tomorrow. And we've got one more of these in 2 weeks, I believe. And I'd love to have your feedback. You can give it to Casey about a topic. We've got other ideas around building resilience in our kids. I think in a couple of weeks, you might start thinking about summer and what does summer look like when you don't even have at least the scaffolding of school day. What does that look like? So how do we prep for a summer with our kids? We also have some content that's been helpful around conflict and conflict resolution, how we learn how to do that well. And then another one around how do we give our kids more and more responsibility and ideally that they would match that responsibility well. So there's some other topics out there I think have been helpful and resonate with other parents. And if you have any thoughts on what's most pertinent, like tonight was crowdsourced, hey, let's talk about this. And so we dug in on that. So thanks for showing up.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
That's Casey.
Thank you
Very much.
Thank
You
you,
guys have a
everyone.
great
for
night.
listening.
See you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.